Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event.
All right, let's talk about U.S. federal contracting. It's this world where billions of dollars are constantly in play and where one tiny little rule change can create huge winners and, of course, huge losers. It really is a high-stakes game. And the rule book? Well, it's always being rewritten. So have you ever really wondered how it works when the government needs to buy something, anything, from a new building to IT services? How do they actually pick who gets that multi-million-dollar check? You might think you know, but the answer can be pretty wild. You'd assume it's always about finding the absolute best value, right? Getting the most innovative solution from the most qualified company for the taxpayers' money. But what if I told you that sometimes none of that matters? Sometimes it literally just comes down to who can click submit first. Okay, let's dive into our first story here. It's a really strange new puzzle coming out of the Department of Transportation that has the entire industry scratching their heads. So get this. In an official notice for a project, the DOT just came out and said it point blank. They would only even look at the first 15 proposals that hit their inbox. Not the best 15, not the cheapest 15, just the first 15. As you can imagine, the reaction from people in the industry was, well, it was disbelief. One person on LinkedIn put it pretty bluntly, saying, "You can't make this shit up." And you know what? That pretty much sums up how everybody felt. It's a move that feels like it's more about making the government's job easier than anything else. And I mean, this just brings up so many questions, right? What happens to the 16th company that submits a proposal, or the 17th? What if a company spent all of its time putting together an amazing, cost-saving, brilliant proposal, but it gets completely ignored because they weren't one of the first 15? You've basically got a system where the best idea could get thrown in the trash just because a mediocre one got there faster. But hey, it's not all confusing news out there. Sometimes the rules change for the better, opening up massive new doors for people. So let's pivot to a huge shift happening in federal construction. We're talking the biggest change in this area in over 50 years. For half a century, construction projects have been tangled up in the super complex rules of something called the Brooks Act, but starting in August 2025, that all changes. Construction is now going to be treated as a commercial service. Now, I know that sounds like boring government speak, but trust me, this is a seismic shift. It unlocks way simpler and faster ways of getting business done. So what does this actually mean? It means government agencies can now use these streamlined, simplified purchasing methods for any construction project up to $7.5 million. That's a huge deal. And the scale of this new opportunity, it's just staggering. Just to give you an idea, the military construction budget for fiscal year 2024 was over $18 billion. A gigantic piece of that pie can now move through these much faster, much more efficient channels. And the real-world benefits here are just fantastic. We're talking about contracts with about 30% less red tape, no more need for these long formal evaluation plans, and getting exemptions from some really burdensome cost data requirements. It just lets the government make quicker apples-to-apples comparisons, which was a win for everybody. Okay, now for our final story. This one's about a conflict that the source material describes with a classic boxing metaphor. It's this clever strategy where one side looks like it's just taking punches, but really, it's setting up a knockout blow. You probably know the rope-a-dope, right? Muhammad Ali made it famous. He'd lean back on the ropes, let his opponent just wail on him until they got tired, and then, bam, he'd come roaring back. Well, in this particular fight, the argument is that America's small businesses are the ones being pushed against the ropes. So, this whole fight is about these things called purchasing thresholds, and it centers on a proposal from the General Services Administration, or GSA. Now, on the surface, it seems like a simple tweak to account for inflation, but according to this analysis, it's actually a smokescreen for a plan that could absolutely wipe out billions of opportunities for small businesses. So this whole thing really boils down to two competing plans, two totally different paths for the future of small business contracting. And believe me, the path that gets chosen is going to have enormous consequences. Let's break down these two paths. First, you have the GSA proposal. It jacks up the spending limits for simple purchases way, way up. But, and this is the absolute key, it freezes the part that is required to be set aside just for small businesses. On the other hand, you have the FIT Procurement Act, which makes sure that as the overall spending limit goes up, the piece that's reserved for small businesses goes up right along with it. And when you look at the real-world impact, it is just stark. Under the GSA plan, the protected zone for small business contracts gets squeezed into this tiny, narrow little band. But under the FIT Act, that window of opportunity is thrown wide open, stretching all the way to $500,000. So what's the bottom line? The analysis concludes that the GSA's rope-a-dope open plan would essentially create a fast lane for big companies on contracts all the way up to $10 million, erasing at least $4 billion a year in opportunities that used to be protected for small businesses. Just gone. So after all that, a bizarre rule, a giant opportunity, and a high-stakes legislative fight, you might be wondering, okay, why does any of this bureaucratic stock really matter to me? Well, the truth is it matters a whole lot. It really boils down to three big things. First, fairness. It's about making sure that every business, whether it's a huge corporation or a tiny startup, gets a fair shot. Second is taxpayer value. Are we the public getting the best possible service, or are we just rewarding whoever was the fastest? And finally, it's about our economic engine. These rules have a direct impact on the survival of small businesses, and they are the absolute backbone of our economy. Ultimately, whether it's a crazy race to be first, a brand new way to build things, or a behind-the-scenes fight over spending limits, federal contracting is a game of rules, and it leaves us with one last big question to think about. When those rules get rewritten, who is left holding the prize? Thanks for watching. I'm Nancy, your AI avatar. If you like this podcast, you can get one for yourself based on a website, YouTube video, or any source. Contact me to get a customized quote for your content. See you soon.